Hey YouTube, Brian LCS, thanks for stopping by the channel and this video, the Amazing Spider-Man number 25 review. Now we're going to get into spoilers, so be warned. But let's take a look at the creative team. We have Zeb Wells writing, and we have John Romita Jr. and Kyrie Andrews on art. So let's take a look at the synopsis for this issue. A mad mathematician named Benjamin Rabin trapped Peter and Mary Jane in an alternate dimension. When MJ chose to save Peter rather than herself, Peter knew time was of the essence to save her. Unable to take the time to explain himself, Spider-Man was forced to work with one person who would help him. No questions asked, Norman Osborn. With no time to build their technology from the ground up, Spider-Man chose to steal important and dangerous parts from the likes of the Fantastic Four and Moon Girl. For a brief moment, the end seemed to justify the means when Peter arrived just in the nick of time to save MJ. But Peter learned that time moved more rapidly in the dimension, and in the untold years Peter was gone, MJ had made a family with the mysterious Paul. This is her story. So we open up with a scene from from a few issues ago where MJ is pushing Peter into the teleporter that they've made, and he's going back to Earth 616. And she is left in this alternate dimension. And we see Peter being, whisked away. And then MJ and Paul are left. And so this is kind of the aftermath of that, or the timeline that we haven't seen. So we see MJ and Paul trying to figure out, what they need to do. Rabin is still trying to merge with the Wyatt the God to basically gain big powers, and he says here that even though his totem Spider-Man is gone, that he will sacrifice MJ to make this happen, that he can gain godly powers. So we see one day later that Mary Jane and Paul now are kind of off to a rocky start. He says we need to move, and she says no. Peter's coming back for me. I can't go anywhere because if he'll come back to this location, and if I'm not here, then he won't find me. And so Paul agrees that he needs to patch up the place and that they'll stay there for now. And then we flash forward a month, and we see that MJ and Paul are working together, and Paul is trying to harness the totems within this dimension to help defeat Rabin. Mary Jane makes a comment that the symbols seem like they are like a slot machine, like slot machine icons. And Paul says, that's interesting. And we see that their story continues to progress. Now it's 3 months later, and they are fighting off Rabin. He's trying to find where they are, and they're fighting him off. And then they realize that they finally need to move. They can't stay there. That their location has been compromised. And so they begin to, venture out in this dimension. And we can see that it's just not not a very good world for them to be living in. And then we flash forward to 3 months later, and they come across a house, and they've looking for supplies. They find some food, baby food, and they break into this house, and they come across these two kids. So big reveal here that the children that have been involved in this storyline are not Paul and Mary Jane's. They didn't have them. Mary Jane didn't give birth to these children. They basically found them within this alternate dimension, and now kind of taking them along for the ride. And so, we see this story progress where they're taking because the kids were alone, there were no parents, and so they take the brother and sister with them to try to protect them from Rabin. And, we see this kind of back and forth that, Mary Jane and Paul are still kind of getting to know each other and trying to figure things out. And again, we continue to advance the story now. Fast forward another month, and now, we see the kids getting more used to Mary Jane and Paul, and they're becoming, a bit of a blended family here. Then we fast forward again another 3 months, and we see a very toned MJ and Paul working on his symbols and totem technology to help defeat Rabin. And MJ is being kind of the test subject. And again, we just continue to see the time progress, days, months, winters, summers. And MJ and Paul are basically beginning to build a relationship here with this, like I said, this blended family. Now that they've had these two kids, they're protecting them. They're learning to, grow and like them and love them. And they continue to, fight off things in this dimension and ultimately, are preparing for, a battle with Raven. And again, we just kind of see these kind of family moments here where they're playing with the kids, and they're cooking dinner and they're having dinner as a family. And then we finally see that Raven has returned. He's found them. He's tracked them down. And we see they go into defense mode, and they are, trying to fight him off. And Paul here in this scene is protecting Mary Jane because now Raven is after Mary Jane. And we see Mary Jane grab the technology that Paul has been working on. And, she mentions here, you're about to hit the jackpot. And we see, kind of something happen, this source of energy and these, a ding, ding, ding like a slot machine. And we see some slot machine symbols. And so I guess now we understand this is the origin of Mary Jane's powers that she's mysteriously developed. And we see this, that she throws cotton candy basically at Raven. So based on the symbols that show up, similar to like with a slot machine, that's how her powers. They're very random depending on what is drawn in the slot machine type and the symbols that show up. That's the powers. So cotton candy's not going to do well against Raven's powers here. And so we see now Raven has the advantage, and he has some type of blade of decay, he calls it. And he's still after, Mary Jane, because if he sacrifices her, he believes he will merge with the god and become godlike and have godlike powers. And right at that moment, we see again another, blast of energy, and Peter has returned. So this is the technology that he was working on with Norman Osborn to get back to this dimension. We see this sequence that we've seen before, where Peter goes after Raven, and Raven kind of gets the best of him. We see Paul plunge the blade into his chest, and Raven is down. And we see Peter, and look at MJ, and they embrace. He kind of almost leans in for a kiss, and she pulls away. And then we see the kids are introduced to Peter, and Peter asked, who are they? And MJ replies, my family. And now we get back to current time. Peter, MJ, and Paul and the kids are now back in the, New York City, Earth 616. And there's some discussion back and forth. Peter's basically asking, will you leave him? We were on track. We were a month ago. We were, we were going to live together in an apartment. Things were great. And, MJ basically says, look, I'm sorry, Peter, but I'm not leaving him. And so they're actually at a hospital because Paul was a little banged up, I guess, from the battle with Raven and the teleportation back to Earth 616. And so Peter leaves, and he runs into the Fantastic Four. Fantastic Four have been looking for him since he, broke into the Baxter building and stole some of their equipment. And we see he's being very short, very, very angry with them still. And they're like, look, we're just trying to help you. You broke into our building. You stole some of our stuff, and you still have this attitude. And, and the Human Torch and Ben are kind of going at him. He's, Peter's dodging them, but then Mr. Fantastic wraps him up. Peter goes to punch him, but then Sue, blocks him with a force field. And then Reed ultimately puts him down, and then now we see Captain America here. And, Captain America's saying, look, I talked to MJ. I understand why you did these things, but you could have been, a little bit more gentler with us and kind of let us in. Peter's just pitying himself, saying, look, I wasn't fast enough to save things. Captain America just says, hey, let's leave him alone. He's been through a lot. Captain America just says, look, he's in a bind. He still is. We've got to just trust him that he'll see his way out of it, however long it takes. And so Captain America and the Fantastic Four leave, and Peter's alone. He's by himself. And so again, we see this flashback now that he's isolating himself. He's being very short with all the important people in his life. Robbie Roberts, his roommate, Aunt May. We see a flashback to a scene where he punches Paul, and then we cut to the alternate dimension, and we see Rabin is stirring. He's still not dead, and he is looking to finish this. The Scarlet Woman must die, meaning Mary Jane. And that's where we end up. We will continue in issue 26. But overall, this was a good issue because we finally got the backstory behind MJ and Paul and where the kids came from. I think a lot of people thought that they were actually MJ's children, that she birthed them, but we see that that's not the case. So that's at least, I think, a good thing. Maybe that leaves a little bit of hope for Peter. The fact that Mary Jane did not have kids with another man, that maybe there's a little bit of hope there that they could get back together. It was good from that perspective to finally get that backstory. We haven't really known what has gone on for 25 issues, so good to get that backstory. The one thing that was interesting was, this was kind of an oversized issue, but we had this basically reprint of 2 or 3 or 4 pages from last issue. So kind of they just reused 4 pages from last issue to kind of retell the story. So they're charging a little bit more money for this issue because it's oversized, but it's 4 pages, multiple panels that we've already seen before. So just a reprint of it. So kind of a little tricky thing that Marvel did there. And like I said, overall though, we did move the story forward. We did get the information, the backstory. So we know how Mary Jane got her powers. We know the history behind the kids and all of that. So overall, this was a pretty solid issue. I will, thinking about my 5 webhead review system, I'll go with 3 webheads for this issue. I was a little disappointed that they reused so many different pages that we've already seen before in an oversized book that they're charging $6.99 for. But from a storyline, it did move the story forward. So there are some rumors out there for issue 26 already. 26 is supposed to end this story arc and clear everything all up. And there is, a mention that a major character is going to die. So there are some spoilers out there, and the issue 26 doesn't release for about 2 weeks. So if you don't want to be spoiled, you may want to, not look at things related to Amazing Spider-Man. If you do want to be spoiled, then you can certainly find the information. It's been floating out there now for a day or two on who actually dies, because there is a major character that will die in issue 26. So I'll review that once that comes out. But let me know. Let me know down in the comments what you think. What do you think of the storyline? What do you think of this, dynamic between Mary Jane and Paul and the kids now, and Peter, and how Peter's handling it and isolating himself and kind of burning a lot of his relationships and really working with Norman Osborn, the only person that really worked with him, his arch enemy, for so long as the Green Goblin, and now he's working, side by side with Norman Osborn. So let me know what you think. Appreciate you guys. I think we're pretty long in this review, so I appreciate you guys sticking it out. We'll see you for issue 26 in a few weeks.